All right, let's watch White Privilege Isn't Real from Jordan Peterson.
Okay. What time is it? 8:50.
It's white privilege not being real o'clock. No. Okay.
I started when?
Why is this the beginning of the video?
6:30. I should stop then. I'm supposed to stop pretty soon.
Why is this in the video? Why is this in the clip?
I'm going to go for 5 more minutes, and then I'll wrap this up. I want to talk about intersectionality and white privilege a bit.
Yeah, tell us what we want to hear.
So I first said, well, we analyzed Marxism, we analyzed postmodernism. I suggested that postmodernism was a way for the Marxists to keep going under a new guise. I suggested that Marxism was fundamentally based on hatred rather than sympathy and empathy. I suggested that the corpses were the evidence for that. I told you why I think postmodernism is fundamentally wrong.
Except I highly doubt you understand what either of those things are. The postmodernism is Marxism, but like you change what Marxism is completely, so it's not about, you know, the proletariat overthrowing the capital owning class, and instead it's about identity groups being oppressed by larger identity groups, which is a different thing that is real and happens. Nothing to do with Marxism. Anyway.
I'll talk to you a little bit about white privilege. So the first thing that I haven't got this quite figured out yet.
Then why are you talking about it?
Why the postmodernists have made the canonical distinctions they've made. Race, ethnicity, sexual proclivity, sexual gender identity, let's say.
Because those are the most common lines along which people are oppressed. Postmodernists didn't just decide on those groups. The people who are... This was just decided by the way society already works. Dominant racial groups tend to oppress minority racial groups. It's almost part of the definition of a race.
Those are 4 dimensions along which people vary. But there's a very large number of dimensions along which people vary, right? In fact, given that there's an infinite number of ways of interpreting the world, you could immediately point out that there's an infinite number of dimensions along which people vary. And so then the postmodern question is, why would you privilege some of those dimensions over the other? And I would say, well, because it's sustained...
That's a very good question, right? Like, wait, let me let him finish.
It's your bloody Marxist interpretation, that's why, but you're not going to say that because it marginalizes, right? You've marginalized that so you can ignore it. So
what?
That's one of the fun things about postmodernism. You can... I have a very vulgar image in my mind, but... I won't share that with you, but you can infer it.
What?
Here's some ways people differ. Intelligence, temperament, geography, historical time. You live now and not 100 years ago. Attractiveness, that's a big one. That's a big one. Would you imagine you could... We won't go there.
This is not a very focused speech.
It's advantageous to be young. You've got potential. It's advantageous to be old. You've got wealth. Health, that's a good one. Sex. Women have advantages. Men have advantages.
Wait, I thought that was...
Maybe one has more than the other. It's not self-evident. Women live about 8 years longer. They're multi-orgasmic.
What are we talking about? So here's what I thought he was going to say. Like, oh, like people also differ in height and attractiveness and eye color. Well, he did say attractiveness. So why single out race? It's like, well, that's a very good question. Why is race constructed in the way that it is? Why is skin color picked out as a particular attribute that we care about, that we think is essential to race? You could include the others. Very good question. Why are people oppressed along the lines of skin color, not along the lines of height? Maybe it's more convenient to oppress people that way.
Athleticism, wealth, family structure, friendship, education. Well, then there's the classic.
I mean, note that, like, some of these are immutable characteristics, right? Some of these are well, completely social constructs like wealth, family structure, right? Nothing to, you have no choice in the matter with some of them.
You know, postmodern ones, race, ethnicity, etc. Why not those other dimensions of variation?
Well, why not those other dimensions of variation? What, that we care about? We do care about them. We care about them where it's applicable. But I mean, obviously, like when we're talking about immutable characteristics, right, that people are oppressed along the lines of, those are the ones we're focusing on.
There's no evidence that they're less important. In fact, there's quite a bit of evidence that they're more important. So, like, why not consider them? Then you get intersectionality. This is one of the things that's really comical, I think, because the postmodernists, identity politics types, actually realized this. They thought, well, okay, race and gender, fair enough. Well, what if you're a black woman? Well, that's a problem because, well, now you've got two dimensions of differentiation. What the hell are we going to do about that? And what if you're gay and black and female?
Yes, the oppression experienced by a gay black female is going to be different than one experienced by a black male, and it's useful to understand the way these identity categories intersect.
Well, then what if you're not very bright and gay and black and female? And then what if you're ugly and not very bright and gay and black and female? And like, you can keep playing that game.
Yes.
You can keep playing that game an infinite number of ways, because there's an infinite number of ways to categorize things, as the postmodernists already pointed out. And so the intersection...
I mean, like, not very bright and ugly are a little bit more subjective, and there's a little less clear how these things play into larger social systems. I mean, at least, like, to some extent they do, but, like, yes.
Intersectionality theorists came along to plug the hole, but they don't know where they're going. They don't understand that the logical conclusion of intersectionality is individuality. Because there's so many different ways of categorizing people's advantages and disadvantages that if you take that all the way out to the end, you say, well, the individual is the ultimate minority. And that's exactly right, and that's exactly what the West discovered. And, you know, the intersectionalists will get there if they don't kill everyone first.
I mean, I'm not sure if this follows, right? Because you can keep adding identity categories. Doesn't mean you can add so many that we would say every individual's experience of oppression is going to be, by definition, their own. I still think we can make some useful generalizations, and we found that the most useful generalizations tend to be when we look closest at the immutable characteristics, right? Like things like race and gender. I'm not sure how it would follow that the individual is any individual is the most oppressed minority. What if they don't have most of the characteristics that tend to lead to oppression? I mean, I guess he hasn't conceded the idea of oppression, so I'm not sure why he would play this game in the first place, right? Like, if he doesn't believe in oppression, then whether or not people have, you know, infinite combinations of characteristics that differentiate them from everybody else wouldn't be like relevant here. You would just get to the concept of individuality, but it's not like intersectionalists deny that people are individuals.
First. So, on to white privilege.
Okay.
So it's really interesting to find out where these ideas come from, because usually the scholarship is so awful, you just cannot possibly believe it. It's just absolutely... It wouldn't, at the University of Toronto in the psychology department, the original paper on white privilege wouldn't have received a passing grade for the hypothesis part of a undergraduate honors thesis.
Why does it matter if the original paper was good or not?
Not even close. There's no methodology at all. The person who wrote it, it was called White Privilege and Male Privilege. A personal account of coming to see correspondences through work in women's studies. Well, first of all, personal account.
Why is he just reading it with this? Oh my God! Okay.
It's like, sorry, no. So she listed a bunch of ways that she thought, she says, these are personal examples of her unearned privilege, or unearned privilege that she saw as she experienced in the 1970s and 1980s. So this, by the way, this idea is the opinion of one person who wrote one paper that has absolutely no empirical backing whatsoever, which is a set of hypotheses which had never been subject to any statistical analysis. Like, if I ask you a bunch of questions, it's not obvious how many questions I'm asking.
So why are you treating it like the representation of the entire concept of white or male privilege, and proceeding to attack it as such if you recognize that it's just one person's opinion? If it was a bad study and just one person's opinion, disregard it and look what's come since.
Because I could say, how tall are you? Or I could say, if you're laying on the ground, how extended would you be? It's like that, 2 questions? It's like, no, it's 1 question. It's just asked 2 ways. And the way you figure out if you ask someone a bunch of questions, how many questions you're asking them, is by doing something called a factor analysis, which is kind of an elementary form of social science investigation. If you make a questionnaire, you have to subject it to a factor analysis, because you've got to find out how many questions you're asking. Because you might think it's 60, but it's probably not. It's probably 5. That's the big 5, by the way. Anyways, who cares about that?
Plug in the factor analysis here,
anyways.
okay.
That's all part of the oppressive white male European patriarchy. So we can just not bother with that, and we can pen a few notes.
First of all, nobody says that. Second of all, you're saying essentially the exact same thing about intersectional feminism, right? This is just part of the postmodern neo-Marxist plot to destroy the white male patriarchy. We can just disregard that. That's what you're saying about the research that you don't like.
Notes about how we think the world is constructed, and then we can screw up the entire political system 2 decades later.
Oh my god, the projection is so hard.
Okay, so here's her white privilege list, some of it. There's like 50 things. I can, if I wish, arrange to be in the company of people of my race most of the time. If I should need to move, I can be pretty sure of renting or purchasing housing in an area which I can afford and in which I would want to live. That's actually a wealth thing, by the way. I can be pretty sure that...
With which tracks pretty heavily with being white in certain places, yeah.
My neighbors in such a location will be neutral or pleasant to me. I can go shopping alone most of the time, pretty well assured that I will not be followed or harassed. I can turn on my television or open to the front page of the paper and see people of my race widely represented. When I'm told about our national heritage or about civilization, I am shown that people of my color made it what it is. Well, there's 50 of those, I think, something like that.
Yeah, those are all pretty good examples of privilege, I think.
Is that white privilege, or is that like majority privilege?
Well, if if whites are the majority, then yeah, it's majority privilege, which is white privilege, yeah.
True, you go to China, you're Chinese. It's the same true if you're Chinese?
Yes.
Is it majority privilege?
Well, Han Chinese, right? Yeah.
And if it's majority privilege, isn't that just part of living within your culture?
Yes.
So let's say you live in your culture, you're privileged.
If you're the majority group in your culture, yes, this is part of the living as not as a minority, yes, in your culture, yeah.
As a member of that culture. Well, obviously, that's what the culture is for. That's what it's for. Why would you bother building?
It's for having a majority group. The reason we have a society is so white people can be the majority. Is that what he's saying?
Damn thing if it didn't accrue benefits to you. Now you might say, well, one of the consequences is that it accrues fewer benefits to those who aren't in the culture. Yeah.
By the culture, do you mean white people? Is he arguing for white supremacy here?
You can immediately associate that with race. You can't just do that, say it's white privilege.
Well, no, you don't have to associate it with it. It's just true.
There's many things it could be. It certainly could be wealth. And the intersectional people have already figured out that there's many things it could be. So, like, what the hell?
Well, because as a matter of fact, it's being white if you're in a Western country.
Seriously? Well, what's going on? Well, we let these pseudo-disciplines into the university because we're stupid and guilty. Seriously.
Wait, guilty?
And they have no methodological requirements and plenty of power and plenty of time to produce nonsensical research.
Guarantee you they do have methodological requirements, and they do not have any power, at least no political power.
And produce like resentful activists, and now we're bearing the fruits of that. It's not pretty. So white privilege. Well, the other thing you might notice is that
he's not attacking the concept of white privilege. He's defending it. He's saying, yeah, whites are the majority. They should get the majority of the benefits. That's how it is. Shut the fuck up.
Tribute.
This could easily be like a Richard Spencer talk.
To the individuals of a community, the attributes of that community on the basis of their racial identity is called racism. That's what racism is. There's no other way of defining it.
Wait.
Attributes of that attribute to the individuals of a community, the attributes of that community on the basis of their racial identity is called racism. That's what racism is. There's no other way of defining it. It's attributing to the individual the characteristics of the group as if the group was homogeneous. Now, the intersectional people have already decided that's not a fair game because there's so many differences between people. But the postmodernists don't care about logical coherence because they regard logical coherence, here it comes again, as a creation of the white European male patriarchal...
No, that's not true. Wait, is he saying that, like, if you talk about white privilege, you're racist? But, okay.
Structure that's designed to oppress the oppressed.
Because you're saying, like, individual white people have attributes of a group? First of all, that's not the definition of racism. If I say all white individuals are white, I'm attributing to them a property of the group that they all have as individuals. It's not racist, it's just true. I mean, you can make actually racist kinds of arguments like that, but I mean, that's not one of them. It's not racist every time you do it. Also, I thought, Jordan Peterson, I thought you hated when people just blanket accused everybody they disagree with of racism. I thought that was something conservatives hate.
And that's technically the case. So logical incoherence, it doesn't matter. And you could say, well, if you act out your logically incoherent ideas in the world, you're going to run face first into a brick wall. And the postmodern answer to that is, there's actually no real world. It's all interpretation.
Okay.
So
well,
there's
I guess
there's
we'll just
no
finish this.
having that discussion, but the postmodernists don't care because they don't believe that discussion...
Yeah, so this was a long build up into actually talking about white privilege, a dismissal of the concept on the grounds that the first study ever to talk about it wasn't good, and then a defense of white people being privileged and majority ethnic groups, I guess, although we could pretend it's not based on ethnicity, majority ethnic groups having power over minority ethnic groups, and then everybody who disagrees with me just hates how logic and reasonable I am. Okay, well, that was bad. That was interesting, but that was bad.